Good afternoon, everybody. It's always a pleasure to come up and talk to a new group about the Agri business, something I'm very proud of and very excited about going forward. Tim's already mentioned some of the reasons why NZX first got involved in the information world within Agri, and I thought it might be useful today just to dig a little deeper and give you a little overview of what it's all about, what it comprises. But I also want to take you through what's happening globally in the publishing world as well, because it's throwing up some challenges that we need to deal with. And I also want to just give you an insight into what we're doing in terms of the online side of the business. There's quite a few numbers and quite a few lines on this first slide, but I think if you look down the left-hand side, you'll get a bit of an insight into the sort of portfolio approach that we've taken to developing the Agri business. Starting at the top left there with Farmers Weekly, our weekly newspaper. We've got 3 magazines that fit into the magazine stable. We've got a new online business, and you can see the revenue growth there off a fairly low base. And then of course we've got our Agri data business both in New Zealand and in Australia. It's fitting that we point out that the Agri data business is certainly growing in Australian dollar terms, but when related back to Kiwi dollar amounts, it's actually showing a slight decline there. Probably the most significant thing on this particular slide is our performance in 2013, where you'll see, most of you will recall, if you lived in Auckland, you probably had a great summer. Unfortunately, the summer wasn't so good for farmers. In fact, it went on and on and on. It just didn't rain. We had a 1 in 70 year drought, and that did have an impact on our business. What actually happened was real estate volumes dipped for the first few months of the year, but did come back very strongly when it did rain finally later in the year, around September, October. So we had quite a drift of advertising revenue into our Farmers Weekly publication, and a corresponding dip in support for our magazines. So I thought that was worth pointing that out. I think we toughed it out. We continue to invest strongly in people and in our products. And I think that's paying dividends. I mean, our first quarter performance this year is we've had a really good rebound, and I think we're travelling quite well. I think the point I'd really like to make too about this slide is that we do offer this portfolio approach. So we're not a one-trick pony, as they say. We actually do have a number of strings to the bow. I thought what would be useful was just to have a quick look at what's happening globally, because this is significant for publishers both here in New Zealand and around the rest of the world. And of course what we're seeing is quite a sharp decline in advertising revenues in daily newspapers particularly, and this is a slide showing US newspapers, but it would be the same in other areas around the world as well. 58% decline, and really the big challenge is this last key point. If I can get the pointer right, is it? Yes, that one? This is a scary number really for any publisher. When you think of $1 that was being spent in print advertising, only 15 cents of it going online. I have seen some other stats which show as little as 10 cents ending up in the online space. But there is actually some good news still out there, and this is one that gives me a lot of hope, particularly with the portfolio of magazines that are part of the Agri business. What I'm really happy about is seeing how these really niche type publications, particularly when they're matched with an online offering, are actually holding up or even growing. And for those of you that are economist readers, this line here is of particular interest to me, because really we aspire to have our 3 magazines and our free newspaper as well if we can, but we certainly aspire to have those magazines fitting into that same realm that the Economist does. But it's like an exclusive club to say that you're an Economist reader, and that's really where we want our magazines to fit in terms of our Agri, or our farmers and our Agri business owner readers. The news isn't so bad here in New Zealand, actually, I'm pleased to say, and I'm not sure whether that's a lag effect. We do tend to follow the trends that happen in other countries, other areas of the world, but so our dip in newspaper revenue, advertising revenue, hasn't been quite as sharp. So remember, it was 58% in the US papers, 22% here. I guess what you've got to look at here, though, is say, eventually these two lines are going to intersect. So this is online advertising tracking up, this is newspaper advertising tracking down. Once again though, very pleased to say that our magazine revenues are holding up quite well in amongst all of that. So I thought, against that backdrop, I thought it would be useful just to give you some insight into what it is that we're doing as a business to position ourselves to counter some of those challenges being delivered by the changes happening with online. Quite a bit to get through on that slide, appreciate that. As point number 2 there about the move to subscription model, that's a very deliberate decision that we made back in 2011. We still do produce Farmers Weekly, which is the country's most read title, has 116,000 readers every week, goes to 80,000 letterboxes, so it's a massive reach and obviously a good frequency from an advertising perspective. One of the keys, I suppose, to our team, and one that I'm very pleased to say NZX has really bought into, is the willingness to invest in creating a great team, particularly the journalist side of things. We see a lot of newsrooms where journalist numbers have been decimated in recent times. There's a lot of content sharing around different platforms, different publications. So I'm very pleased to say that NZX continues to believe in that investing in good people is actually going to see us through. And there I've mentioned some of the awards that our team of reporters and editors have won over the last couple of years in particular. One of our magazines last year won the Best Trade Publication at the Canon Media Awards. It's the primary or the peak media awards for the country. This year Farmers Weekly has been selected as a finalist in the community section, so we'll be hearing the result of that early May. No recycling of content across multiple sites. That's something that we see a lot of happening, particularly in the daily world. Fairfax and APN have both struggled to balance the books, I believe, and they're sharing a lot of content around a lot of different places. We've shied away from that. We very much have a paywall in place on our websites, and we firmly believe that is the best way to go. We are very committed to print, however, as you can see, we're also starting to get more than just a toehold in the online space. So we really launched into online in a serious way at the end of 2012, and in early 2013 we collected a number of websites into one sort of hub, if you like, and we called it agrihq.co.nz. Very proud of that little catchline that follows the agrihq.co.nz, home of farming intelligence, and I think that really what we're trying to do with that, and I believe we do it reasonably well, is establish this business, NZX Agri, as the place where people come for the best farming information. So that's on a global scale. We do call our head office down in Fielding Global HQ, and it's part of it is a bit of a wind-up for our competition, I suppose, but it actually does say a lot about the aspiration we have as a business. So our page views and our visits and unique visitors and so on, they do continue to grow, admittedly off a low base. But one stat that we look at quite frequently is Met Service, the rural pages of Met Service. As you know, farmers hang on every word when it comes to weather. It drives a lot of revenue behind their farm gates. They have roughly 1 million page views a month. We're a little way off that, but we see no reason why we can't be at that level in time. And I mean, if we can continue that sort of trajectory, we're going to get there reasonably smartly. A point I think worth making here is that, and it's probably a reflection of our desire to invest in good people, is when we couldn't actually find someone to run the digital business for us, we actually went global in the search for somebody, and we picked up the head of digital for UK Farmers Weekly, a fellow called Julian Gardner, who joined us in April last year. So Julian and his family have relocated to Palmerston North in their case, but he works every day for us in the Fielding office. And I think that's a reflection again just of the commitment we've got. I want to turn now to the opportunity that we have in terms of our agri data business in particular. What we can see here is that there's two commodities, dairy and grain, particularly wheat, that we're reasonably deep in. Wheat obviously in Australia in our agri data business, and dairy here in New Zealand. Up this side here is along the bottom axis here is actually the combined value of exports. So this is showing you, obviously dairy's way out here, 13 odd billion or so. These are a couple of years ago old numbers, I suspect. I actually don't know exactly which year they are, but I'm pretty sure this one's out here somewhere now. But it shows you, well, this slide actually reinforces the opportunity that we have to develop our Agri data content across a whole lot of other commodities if we choose to. And last slide for me here. Again, just reinforcing that opportunity, but also making a serious point about the opportunity to go deeper into, in our case, dairy in New Zealand. If you recall, the data business in Australia here is largely based on grain. In fact, it's almost all grain. Whereas in New Zealand, our revenue is generated from commentary and analysis of agri data across a number of different commodities. What this graph is really showing, I suppose, is just highlighting the opportunity, the difference between, deep in one commodity versus shallowish in a number and sort of deep in dairy on this side. So we've got some real upside to come there. The point I wanted to finish on also is we do see a real opportunity in the collection of a lot more of the on-farm data that's being produced. There's a lot more clever technology actually sitting on farms these days, automatically collecting data from stock weights to weather information to grass growth information, all those sorts of things. There's a real opportunity, I believe, and NZX is buying into this as well, that there's a real opportunity to collect all of this information in one place and create some clever risk management tools or just decision support tools that we can deliver to a fairly willing audience in that space, or a very, very willing audience in that space. So, yeah, an exciting place to be, and welcome any questions from you now. Great. Thanks a lot.